Hey guys, tonight we begin not with conquest or glory, but with the surprisingly sophisticated and occasionally horrifying world of Roman hygiene. We're stepping into a civilization that built elaborate public baths while using urine as mouthwash, that celebrated cleanliness while sitting on communal toilet seats, and that turned daily washing into a social event complete with gossip, business deals, and the occasional political assassination. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Cleanliness wasn't just next to godliness in ancient Rome. It was practically a civic duty. Unlike their medieval descendants who would come to fear bathing, Romans embraced hygiene with an enthusiasm that bordered on obsession. They built massive public bath complexes, developed sophisticated plumbing systems, and created beauty routines that would make a modern spa enthusiast jealous. But as we'll discover, Roman ideas about what constituted proper hygiene were sometimes brilliant, sometimes bizarre, and occasionally downright dangerous. Let's begin with a fundamental truth about Roman society. Being clean wasn't just about personal health, it was about social status, civic virtue, and demonstrating that you were, quite literally, civilized. The Latin word for civilization, civilitas, shared roots with concepts of urban life and proper behavior. To be Roman was to be clean, and to be clean was to separate yourself from the barbarians beyond the empire's borders. But Roman hygiene wasn't just about soap and water. It was a complex system of social rituals, architectural marvels, and cultural practices that touched every aspect of daily life, from the moment a Roman citizen woke up to the time they retired. For the evening, cleanliness shaped their day in ways that would seem both familiar and utterly foreign to modern sensibilities. The cornerstone of Roman hygiene was the public bath, These weren't simple washing facilities. They were elaborate social and cultural complexes that served as the beating heart of Roman community life. The largest bath complexes, like the baths of Caracalla or the baths of Diocletian, were architectural marvels that could accommodate thousands of bathers simultaneously. Walking into a major Roman bath complex was like entering a small city dedicated entirely to wellness and social interaction. The buildings themselves were engineering masterpieces, featuring soaring vaulted ceilings, intricate mosaic floors, and elaborate heating systems that would be the envy of modern architects. But more than their impressive architecture, these baths represented a fundamentally different approach to cleanliness and community. The Roman bathing process was methodical and social. Bathers would begin in the apoditerium or changing room, where they would undress and store their clothes in niches along the walls. Theft was common, so wealthy Romans brought slaves to guard their belongings, while the less fortunate simply hoped for the best or paid a small fee to an attendant. From the changing room, bathers moved through a carefully orchestrated sequence of rooms, each designed to serve a specific function in the cleansing process. The journey typically began in the tepidarium, a warm room that served as a transition between the cool outdoor air and the intense heat that was to come. Here, Romans would begin to sweat gently while socializing with friends, conducting business, or simply relaxing. Next came the caldarium, the hot room, where temperatures could reach levels that would be considered dangerous by modern standards. The heat was generated by an ingenious system called the hypocaust, where hot air from furnaces was circulated through spaces beneath the floors and within the walls. Slaves, working in brutal conditions, constantly fed wood into these furnaces. To maintain the tremendous heat required in the caldarium, Romans would work up a serious sweat while sitting on heated marble benches or soaking in hot pools. The intense heat was believed to open the pores and purge the body of impurities, a concept that actually had some medical validity, though the Romans understood it through the lens of their own medical theories about bodily humors and balance. After thoroughly heating themselves, bathers would move to the frigidarium, a cold room with a pool of unheated water. The shock of transitioning from extreme heat to cold water was considered invigorating and healthful, and many Romans swore by this practice for maintaining good health and vigor. The cold plunge was also thought to close the pores and tone the body. But the bathing process involved more than just moving between rooms of different temperatures. Romans didn't use soap as we know it. Instead, they employed a substance called sapo, which was actually a Germanic invention that Romans initially viewed with suspicion. More commonly, Romans used olive oil as a cleanser, rubbing it into their skin and then scraping it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. The strigil was an essential piece of bathing equipment, and wealthy Romans often owned elaborately decorated versions made of silver or bronze. The scraping process removed not just the oil, but also dead skin, sweat, and dirt, leaving the skin clean and smooth. Slaves, called capsari, often performed this service for their masters, though many Romans preferred to wield the strigil themselves. The public baths weren't just about getting clean, they were centers of Roman social life. Business deals were negotiated in the tepidarium, political gossip was exchanged in the caldarium, and romantic liaisons were arranged in the gardens that surrounded many bath complexes. The baths were where Romans went to see and be seen, to network, to relax, and to participate in the complex social rituals that defined their civilization. Different baths catered to different social classes. The largest and most luxurious thermae were open to all citizens, but practical considerations meant that the wealthy could afford to visit during the less crowded morning hours, while the poor typically came in the afternoon when entry fees were lower but the facilities were more crowded and less pleasant. Women and men usually bathed at different times or in separate sections, though the exact arrangements varied by location and period. Some smaller baths had separate facilities for women, while others designated specific hours for female bathers. Mixed bathing did occur, particularly in some private baths, but it was generally frowned upon by moral conservatives and was periodically banned by various emperors. The baths also featured amenities that went far beyond washing. Many complexes included libraries, gymnasiums, gardens, restaurants, and even lecture halls. Romans might spend entire days at the baths, moving from activity to activity, socializing, exercising, eating, and of course, bathing. It was a lifestyle, centered around communal wellness and social interaction. But the public baths had their dark side. The warm, humid environment was perfect for the spread of disease, and epidemics sometimes traced their origins to bath complexes. The intense heat could be dangerous, particularly for the elderly or those with heart conditions. Accidents were common, and some Romans died from overheating or drowning in the pools. Violence was also a concern. The baths were public spaces where tensions could flare, and fights sometimes broke out over everything from political disagreements to disputes over bathing etiquette. Theft was endemic, despite the presence of guards and attendants, and the very openness that made the baths centers of social life also made them venues for criminal activity. Despite these risks, Romans considered regular bathing essential for both physical and moral health. To neglect bathing was seen as a sign of barbarity, poverty, or mental instability. The baths were so central to Roman life that when the empire fell and the elaborate infrastructure could no longer be maintained, the loss of public bathing was seen as one of the clearest signs of civilization's collapse. While the public baths dominated Roman bathing culture, private bathing facilities were also important, particularly for the wealthy. Roman houses, especially larger ones, often included private bath suites called balnea. These miniature versions of the public baths allowed wealthy Romans to enjoy the full bathing experience in the privacy of their own homes. Private baths typically included the same sequence of rooms found in public facilities: a changing area, tepidarium, caldarium, and frigidarium, though on a much smaller scale. The hypercost heating system was also employed in private baths, requiring a significant investment in both construction and ongoing fuel costs. Only the truly wealthy could afford to build and maintain such facilities. For Romans, who couldn't afford private baths but wanted more privacy than the public facilities offered, there were smaller commercial baths scattered throughout Roman cities. These balnea were more intimate than the great thermae, often serving specific neighborhoods or social groups. They offered a middle ground between the crowded public baths and the exclusive private facilities of the elite. The experience of bathing in a private facility was markedly different from the public baths. Without the crowds, noise, and social pressure of the thermae, private bathing could be a more meditative and truly cleansing experience. Wealthy Romans often bathed with family members or close friends, making it an intimate social ritual rather than a public performance. Private baths also allowed for greater personal customization. Romans could control the temperature, add their preferred oils and perfumes to the water, and bathe according to their own schedule rather than the operating hours of public facilities. Some wealthy Romans bathed multiple times per day, particularly during hot weather or after physical exertion. The maintenance of private baths required a dedicated staff of slaves who were responsible for heating the water, cleaning the facilities, and attending to the bathers' needs. These slaves, known as balneators, were skilled specialists who understood the complex systems required to operate a Roman bath. The best balneators were highly valued and could command high prices in the slave market. Private baths were also venues for more exotic bathing practices. Wealthy Romans experimented with milk baths, wine baths, and baths infused with various herbs and minerals. These luxury treatments were believed to have specific health and beauty benefits, and recipes for specialty baths were closely guarded secrets among the elite. The oils and perfumes used in private bathing were often imported from across the empire at enormous expense. Fine olive oil from Spain, rose oil from Egypt, and exotic spices from India were all prized for their supposed effects on the skin and overall health. The very wealthy might bathe in oil that cost more than a common laborer's annual wage. Yet even with all these luxuries, private bathing couldn't entirely replace the social experience of the public baths. Most Romans who had access to private facilities still regularly visited the thermae for business, social, and cultural reasons. The public baths remained the heart of Roman social life, even for those who could afford to avoid them. Roman dental hygiene presents a fascinating study in contrasts. Sophisticated understanding combined with practices that would horrify modern dentists. Romans were acutely aware of the importance of dental health and fresh breath, developing elaborate routines and remedies that were sometimes effective and sometimes dangerous. The foundation of Roman dental care was the morning mouth-cleaning ritual. Romans didn't have toothbrushes in the modern sense, but they had several methods for cleaning their teeth. The most common was the use of linen cloths rubbed with various cleaning agents. These cloths were often soaked in wine, vinegar, or salt. Water, substances that did have some antibacterial properties. More sophisticated Romans used tooth powders made from a variety of ingredients. The recipes for these powders varied widely, but common components included pumice, stone, crushed bone, oyster shells, eggshells, and ashes from burnt plants. These abrasive materials could effectively remove plaque and stains, though they also wore down tooth enamel over time. Some Roman tooth powders included more exotic and expensive ingredients. Crushed pearls were believed to whiten teeth and strengthen them, though their primary effect was probably to demonstrate the user's wealth. Ambergris, cuttlefish bone, and various imported spices were also used in premium dental preparations. The Romans also developed early versions of toothpaste, mixing their powdered ingredients with honey, oil, or water to form a paste. These early toothpastes were applied with the finger or a cloth, and could be quite effective at cleaning teeth. Though the abrasive nature of many ingredients meant that overuse could cause significant damage, for breath freshening, Romans employed a wide array of herbs, spices, and other substances. Mint, parsley, fennel, and dill were commonly chewed to freshen breath. More exotic options included cardamom, cinnamon, and cloves, though these were expensive luxuries available only to the wealthy. The most notorious Roman dental practice was the use of urine as a mouthwash. This practice, while revolting to modern sensibilities, actually had some scientific basis. Urine contains ammonia, which does have antibacterial properties and can help fight tooth decay and gum disease. Spanish urine was particularly prized, supposedly because of the diet of Spanish people, though the real reasons for this preference are unclear. Romans believed that using urine as a mouthwash not only cleaned the teeth, but also whitened them. The poet Catullus even mocked a friend for having teeth so white they must be due to the Spanish urine habit. Despite its effectiveness, this practice was controversial even among Romans, with many considering it disgusting and uncivilized. Professional dental care was available in Rome, though it was rudimentary by modern standards. Dental practitioners, who were often also general physicians, could extract teeth, treat abscesses, and provide various remedies for dental pain. However, their understanding of dental anatomy and disease was limited, and many treatments were more harmful than helpful. Tooth extraction was the most common dental procedure, performed without anesthesia using crude forceps and considerable force. The mortality rate from dental infections was high, and many Romans suffered from chronic dental pain throughout their lives. Wealthy Romans sometimes had extracted teeth replaced with gold or ivory substitutes, though these were primarily cosmetic rather than functional. The Roman diet, while varied and often nutritious, presented specific challenges for dental health. The heavy use of honey as a sweetener contributed to tooth decay, while the consumption of acidic foods like vinegar and wine could erode tooth enamel. However, the Roman diet also included many foods that were beneficial for dental health, such as fresh fruits, vegetables, and dairy products. Romans were also conscious of the social implications of dental health. Bad breath was considered a serious social liability, and there are numerous references in Roman literature to the embarrassment and social exclusion that could result from poor oral hygiene. Fresh breath was associated with good health, prosperity, and moral character. The wealthy took elaborate precautions to maintain their dental health and appearance. Some employed specialized slaves whose sole job was to maintain their master's oral hygiene. These slaves would clean their master's teeth, prepare custom dental preparations, and even taste their food to ensure it wouldn't cause bad breath. Despite their efforts, dental problems were common among all social classes in Rome. Archaeological evidence from Roman cemeteries shows high rates of tooth decay, gum disease, and tooth loss. The average Roman could expect to lose several teeth during their lifetime, and chronic dental pain was simply accepted as a normal part of life. Roman hair care was an elaborate art form that combined practical hygiene with fashion, social signaling, and even political statement. The way Romans styled, colored, and maintained their hair said volumes about their status, wealth, and personal identity, making hair care one of the most socially significant aspects of Roman hygiene. The basic routine of Roman hair care began with regular washing, though not as frequently as modern standards would suggest. Romans typically washed their hair once a week or so, using various cleansing agents and techniques. The most common hair cleanser was sapo, the soap-like substance made from animal fat and ash, though this was often considered too harsh for regular use on hair. More gentle options included washing with clay, particularly fuller's earth, which could absorb oil and dirt without being overly drying. Eggs were also used as a hair cleanser, with the proteins helping to clean and condition the hair simultaneously. Some Romans preferred to wash their hair with various herbal decoctions, believing that different plants had specific benefits for hair health and appearance. The process of hair washing was typically performed by slaves, at least among the wealthy. These ornatresses, or hairdressing slaves, were skilled specialists who understood the complex techniques required to clean, style, and maintain their master's or mistress's hair. The best ornatresses were highly valued and could command significant prices in the slave market. After washing, Roman hair care focused heavily on styling and decoration. The styles varied dramatically between men and women, and fashion trends changed frequently, often influenced by the hairstyles of emperors and their families. During the early empire, men generally wore their hair short and relatively simple, But by the later empire, more elaborate styles became fashionable. Women's hairstyles were particularly complex and could take hours to achieve. The most fashionable styles often required elaborate arrangements of braids, curls, and decorative elements. Hair was piled high, woven with ribbons and jewelry, and sometimes supplemented with hair pieces or wigs made from the hair of Germanic or Celtic slaves whose blonde or red hair was highly prized. The tools used for Roman hairstyling were surprisingly sophisticated. Bronze and silver hairpins, combs made from bone or ivory, and curling irons heated over charcoal fires allowed skilled ornatresses to create intricate styles. Mirrors made from polished metal provided feedback during the styling process, though their poor quality made precise work difficult. Hair coloring was extremely popular among Romans, particularly women. The most desired hair color was golden blonde, which was associated with Germanic barbarians, but paradoxically considered the height of fashion among Roman women. Various bleaching agents were used to achieve this look, including mixtures of soap, ash, and even urine. The process of bleaching hair was time-consuming and potentially dangerous. Women would apply the bleaching mixture to their hair and then sit in the sun for hours, sometimes wearing special hats with holes that allowed the sun to reach their hair while protecting their faces. The chemicals used could cause severe damage to both hair and scalp, and some women suffered permanent hair loss from overly aggressive bleaching. For those who couldn't achieve the desired color through bleaching, wigs and hairpieces were readily available. These were often made from the hair of slaves or prisoners of war, with different regions providing hair of different colors and textures. Germanic hair was particularly prized for its light color, while hair from India was valued for its thickness and shine. Hair care also included various treatments designed to promote growth, prevent loss, and maintain health. Romans used a variety of oils, including olive oil, almond oil, and more exotic options like oil from Egypt or Syria. These oils were often infused with herbs believed to have beneficial properties for hair health. Bear grease was considered one of the most effective treatments for hair loss, though it was expensive and had an unpleasant odor. Other supposed remedies for baldness included applications of ground-up hedgehog spines, mouse droppings, and various plant extracts. While most of these treatments were ineffective, the oils used as carriers could actually help moisturize and protect the hair. Perfuming the hair was also important, as Romans believed that pleasant-smelling hair was a sign of good health and proper hygiene. Various flowers, herbs, and imported spices were used to scent the hair, with rose, violet, and jasmine being particularly popular among women. Men might use more subtle scents like mint or bay laurel. The social significance of hair in Roman culture cannot be overstated. A person's hairstyle immediately communicated their social status, wealth, and even political affiliations. Elaborate hairstyles required significant time and money to maintain, marking their wearers as members of the leisure class. Simple, practical hairstyles, on the other hand, marked their wearers as working people or slaves. Changes in imperial hairstyles often triggered empire-wide fashion trends. When an empress adopted a new hairstyle, wealthy women throughout the empire would quickly follow suit. Portraits, sculptures, and coins helped spread these fashion trends, showing the latest imperial styles to people across the vast Roman territories. Hair was also deeply connected to Roman concepts of gender and morality. Long, elaborately styled hair was expected of respectable women, while short hair might suggest poverty, slavery, or moral transgression. Men were expected to keep their hair neat and relatively short, though the exact length and style varied with fashion and personal preference. Roman perfume and cosmetics represented one of the most sophisticated beauty industries in the ancient world. The Romans inherited and expanded upon Greek and Egyptian traditions, creating a complex culture of personal scenting and appearance enhancement that rivaled anything seen until the modern era. The foundation of Roman perfumery was the understanding that scent was not just about masking unpleasant odors, but about creating a personal aura that could attract, intimidate, or simply please. Romans believed that different scents had different effects on both the wearer and those around them, making the choice of perfume a strategic decision. The most basic perfumes were simple oil-based preparations infused with single ingredients. Rose oil was perhaps the most popular, prized for its delicate scent and supposed health benefits. Roses were cultivated throughout the empire specifically for perfume production, with different regions developing their own varieties prized for particular characteristics. More complex perfumes combined multiple ingredients in elaborate formulations that could take days or weeks to prepare. Master perfumers, known as unghenari, were skilled artisans who commanded high prices for their custom creations. The most successful unghenari could amass considerable wealth and social status through their craft. The ingredients used in Roman perfumes came from across the known world. Frankincense and myrrh from Arabia, cinnamon and cardamom from India, amber from the Baltic, and countless flowers, herbs, and spices from throughout the Mediterranean created a vast palette of scenting options. The most exotic ingredients could cost more than their weight in gold. Animal-derived ingredients were also important in Roman perfumery. Musk from deer, civet from cat-like animals, and ambergris from whales provided base notes that helped other scents last longer on the skin. These ingredients were rare and expensive, making perfumes containing them luxury items, available only to the wealthy. The preparation of perfumes was a complex process that required considerable skill and experience. Ingredients had to be carefully balanced, extracted at the right times and temperatures, and aged properly to develop their full potential. The best perfumers guarded their formulas closely, passing them down only to trusted apprentices or family members. Romans applied perfume not just to their bodies, but to their clothing, hair, and even their homes. Wealthy Romans might use different perfumes for different occasions, times of day, or seasons. Some perfumes were considered appropriate for religious ceremonies, others for social gatherings, and still others for private, intimate moments. The application of perfume was itself a ritual. Oils were rubbed into the skin, powders were dusted over clothing, and solid perfumes were rubbed on pulse points. Special slaves, called cosmeta, were responsible for applying perfumes and cosmetics to their masters and mistresses, requiring considerable skill to achieve the desired effects. Cosmetics in Rome served both aesthetic and practical purposes. Face paints and powders could enhance natural beauty, but they also provided protection from the sun and wind. Lead-based white face paint was popular among women seeking a pale complexion, though its toxic effects were not understood at the time. Eye makeup was particularly important in Roman beauty culture. Both men and women used coal, made from antimony or lead, to line their eyes and darken their lashes. This wasn't just vanity. The antimony-based coal actually had antibacterial properties that could help prevent eye infections, though the lead-based versions were harmful. Rouge for the cheeks and lips was made from various sources, including crushed insects, plant dyes, and mineral pigments. The most prized rouge was made from cinnabar, a mercury compound that provided a brilliant red color, but was highly toxic. Many Roman cosmetics contained dangerous substances that caused long-term health problems. The preparation and application of cosmetics was a time-consuming process that could take hours. Wealthy Roman women would begin their beauty routine early in the morning, working with their cosmeter to achieve the perfect look for the days. Activities. The process included not just makeup, but also hairstyling, perfuming, and the selection of appropriate jewelry and clothing. Different occasions called for different cosmetic approaches. Religious ceremonies might require minimal makeup to show piety and humility, while social gatherings could justify elaborate paint and decoration. The theatre and gladiatorial games called for yet another approach, as the distance from the action meant that bolder makeup was necessary to be seen. The cost of high-quality perfumes and cosmetics was enormous. A small vial of the finest perfume could cost as much as a skilled worker's annual salary. This expense meant that luxury beauty products became important status symbols, ways for the wealthy to display their prosperity and refinement. Men also used perfumes and some cosmetics, though more subtly than women. Wealthy Roman men might wear light, floral, or herbal scents, and use subtle eye makeup for special occasions. However, excessive use of cosmetics by men was often mocked as effeminate or foreign, requiring a careful balance between enhancement and respectability. The social impact of Roman beauty culture extended beyond individual appearance. The perfume and cosmetics industries employed thousands of people throughout the empire. From ingredient gatherers and processors to retailers and appliers, the demand for exotic ingredients drove trade networks that stretched from Britain to India, making beauty one of the major economic forces in the ancient world. Roman clothing and its maintenance represented a complex intersection of hygiene, social, status, and practical necessity. Unlike modern washable fabrics, Roman garments required careful handling, specialized cleaning techniques, and considerable expense to maintain properly. The way Romans cared for their clothing reveals much about their attitudes toward cleanliness, appearance, and social hierarchy. The basic Roman wardrobe consisted of several layers, each serving specific functions. The innermost layer was the subliga for men, or the strophium for women, essentially underwear that absorbed sweat and provided a barrier between the body and outer garments. These undergarments were typically made of linen, which was absorbent and could be washed relatively easily. Over the underwear, Romans wore a tunic, a simple shirt-like garment that served as the foundation of most outfits. Tunics were made from various materials depending on the wearer's social status and wealth. Common citizens wore tunics of rough wool or linen, while the wealthy enjoyed silk, fine wool, or linen so sheer it was almost transparent. The famous toga was reserved for male Roman citizens and was the most prestigious garment in Roman culture, made from a large semicircle of wool. The toga was draped around the body in a complex arrangement that required considerable skill to achieve properly. The pure white toga virilis marked adult male citizenship, while senators wore togas with a purple stripe to indicate their rank. Women wore a long dress called a stola over their tunic, often topped with a palla, a large rectangular cloak that could be draped in various ways. The colors, fabrics, and decorations of these garments all communicated information about the wearer's social status, wealth, and even moral character. Cleaning these garments presented significant challenges. Soap, while known to the Romans, was not commonly used for laundry. Instead, Romans relied on a substance called fuller's earth, a type of clay that could absorb oils and dirt from fabric. Professional cleaners, known as falones, operated shops throughout Roman cities, where they would clean and process garments. The process of professional cleaning was both labor-intensive and somewhat revolting by modern standards. Garments were soaked in large vats filled with water and various cleaning agents, including fullers, earth, ash, and most notoriously, urine. Human urine, with its ammonia content, was an effective cleaning agent and was collected specifically for use in laundries. Slaves and workers would tread on the soaked garments in the vats, using their feet to work the cleaning agents through the fabric. This treading process helped remove dirt and stains, while also helping to felt wool fabrics, making them more weather-resistant. After thorough cleaning, garments were rinsed multiple times and then dried. Wealthy Romans changed their undergarments daily, as these absorbed most of the body's oils and sweat. However, outer garments like togas and stolas were cleaned much less frequently, perhaps weekly or monthly depending on use. The expense and labor involved in professional cleaning meant that most Romans owned multiple sets of outer garments to allow for regular cleaning cycles. The whitening of garments was particularly important in Roman culture, as bright white clothing was associated with cleanliness, status, and moral purity. Professional fullers used various techniques to achieve brilliant whites, including bleaching with sulfur fumes and exposure to sunlight. The phrase "whiter than white" comes from the Roman obsession with achieving perfect whiteness in their togas. Different fabrics required different care techniques. Silk, imported at enormous expense from China, was so delicate that it required specialized handling and could not be subjected to the harsh treading process used for wool. Linen could be boiled for sanitization, but wool had to be cleaned more gently to prevent shrinkage and damage. Home laundering was possible for simpler garments and underclothing. Roman households might wash linen, tunics, and subligaria in water heated over the household fire using ash or soap if available. However, the complex draping and finishing of formal garments like togas required professional expertise to maintain their proper appearance. Stain removal was a specialized art, with different techniques for different types of stains. Blood stains might be treated with cold water and salt, wine stains with white wine or vinegar, and oil stains with fuller's earth or chalk. The knowledge of effective stain removal techniques was closely guarded by professional fullers and passed down through generations of workers. The storage and care of clean garments was also important. Wealthy Romans stored their clothing in wooden chests with aromatic woods like cedar to repel insects. Sachets of herbs and spices were placed among the garments to keep them fresh and prevent moth damage. Regular airing and brushing helped maintain the garments. Between cleanings, seasonal clothing care was crucial in a world without climate control. Heavy wool garments had to be properly stored during warm weather to prevent insect damage, while lighter clothing needed protection during storage in winter. The wealthy employed specialized slaves to manage their wardrobes, ensuring that garments were properly maintained and ready when needed. The social implications of clothing care cannot be understated. A Roman's appearance communicated their status, wealth, and character to everyone they encountered. Dirty, poorly maintained clothing could destroy a person's reputation and social standing, while perfectly maintained garments enhanced one's status and authority. The economics of clothing care also reveal much about Roman society. The labor-intensive nature of garment maintenance created employment for thousands of workers, from the slaves who collected urine to the skilled fullers who managed the cleaning process. The industry was regulated by guilds and subject to various taxes and fees, making clothing care a significant part of the urban economy. Roman waste management and sewage systems represented some of the most advanced sanitation engineering in the ancient world. The famous Roman sewers, public latrines, and waste disposal methods created a level of urban hygiene that wouldn't be matched again in Europe for over 1,000 years. The foundation of Roman sewage management was the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer of Rome that began as a drainage ditch in the 6th century BCE and evolved into a massive underground system that carried wastewater from across the city into the Tiber River. This engineering marvel was so well built that parts of it are still in use today, over 2 millennia later. The Cloaca Maxima was just the main artery of a vast network of sewers that honeycombed beneath Roman cities. Smaller sewers collected waste from individual buildings and neighborhoods, channeling it into larger collectors that eventually fed into the main system. The engineering required to create proper gradients for flow, prevent backups, and maintain the system was incredibly sophisticated. Public latrines were a common sight in Roman cities, serving as communal toilet facilities that could accommodate dozens of users simultaneously. These latrines featured long stone or marble benches with circular holes cut into them, beneath which flowed streams of water that carried waste away to the sewers. The design was both efficient and social, as users would sit side by side and often conduct business or casual conversation while relieving themselves. The public latrines were surprisingly comfortable and well appointed. Many featured decorative mosaics on the floors and walls, and some even had heated seats, a luxury achieved by running hot air from hypocaust systems beneath the marble benches. Sponges attached to sticks were provided for cleaning, though users were expected to rinse these communal wiping tools in the flowing water between uses. Private homes of the wealthy also featured sophisticated toilet facilities. These private latrines were often located near kitchens or bathrooms, where they could be connected to the household's water supply and sewage systems. Some wealthy Romans had multiple toilets in their homes, including facilities for guests, and family members. The Roman attitude toward bodily functions was remarkably pragmatic and open compared to later European cultures. There was little shame or privacy associated with using toilet facilities, and the communal nature of public latrines fostered a casual social atmosphere. Business deals, political discussions, and gossip all flowed as freely as the water beneath the latrine seats. Waste disposal extended beyond human sewage to include household refuse, commercial waste, and the byproducts of urban life. Roman cities generated enormous amounts of garbage, from food scraps and broken pottery to manufacturing waste and dead animals. Managing this waste was crucial for maintaining public health and urban livability. Street cleaning was a constant necessity in Roman cities. Slaves and low-status workers swept streets daily, collecting debris and disposing of it outside the city walls. However, many Romans simply threw their garbage into the streets despite laws and fines designed to prevent this practice. The result was that Roman streets, despite regular cleaning, were often littered with refuse. The disposal of human waste from private chamber pots presented particular challenges. While wealthy homes might be connected to the sewer system, many Romans relied on portable toilets that had to be emptied regularly. Slaves typically performed this unpleasant task, carrying the waste to public dumps or sewers. Some entrepreneurs collected human waste to sell to farmers as fertilizer, creating a modest but necessary industry. Night soil men were specialized workers who collected human waste from private homes and public facilities, usually working under cover of darkness to avoid the social stigma associated with their profession. Despite the unpleasant nature of their work, these men provided an essential service and could sometimes earn decent livings in cities where their services were in high demand. The Roman sewer system required constant maintenance to function properly. Slaves and condemned criminals were often forced to work in the sewers, clearing blockages, repairing damage, and removing accumulated debris. This work was dangerous, as sewers could fill with toxic gases, collapse without warning, or flood during heavy rains. Industrial waste from workshops, tanneries, and other businesses added additional challenges to Roman waste management. Dyes, chemicals, and other byproducts of manufacturing had to be disposed of somehow, often ending up in the sewers or water supply, with serious consequences for public health. The Romans had little understanding of industrial pollution and its long-term effects. Dead animals presented another disposal challenge. When horses, cattle, or other large animals died in the city, their carcasses had to be removed quickly to prevent disease and unpleasant odors. Specialized workers dragged dead animals outside the city walls, where they were buried, burned, or left for scavengers to dispose of naturally. The water supply that fed Roman toilets and sewers was itself a marvel of engineering, with aqueducts bringing fresh water from distant sources into the city. This constant flow of clean water was essential for the proper functioning of the waste disposal system, as it provided the hydraulic force needed to carry waste through the sewers and out of the city. However, the Roman sewage system had significant limitations and health hazards that weren't fully understood at the time. The lack of proper traps meant that sewer gases could rise up through toilet seats and into buildings, creating unpleasant odors and potential health risks. Some Romans believed these gases were actually beneficial, thinking they prevented certain diseases, but in reality they could be quite harmful. The mixing of sewage with the water supply was another serious problem. While aqueducts brought fresh water into cities, the disposal of waste into rivers and streams often contaminated downstream water sources. Romans who lived downstream from major cities faced significant health risks from waterborne diseases, though the connection between sewage and illness wasn't well understood. Despite these limitations, the Roman approach to waste management was revolutionary for its time and represented a level of urban planning and engineering that wouldn't be matched again for centuries. The investment in sewage infrastructure demonstrated the Roman commitment to public health and urban livability, even if their understanding of disease transmission was incomplete. The decline of Roman sewage systems marked one of the clearest indicators of imperial collapse. As central authority weakened and tax revenues declined, the maintenance of complex urban infrastructure became impossible. Sewers backed up aqueducts, fell into disrepair, and cities reverted to much more primitive waste disposal methods. The loss of Roman sanitation engineering was one of the most significant setbacks in human urban development. Roman medical practices relating to hygiene reveal a fascinating blend of practical wisdom, theoretical knowledge, and dangerous misconceptions. Roman physicians, influenced by Greek medical traditions, developed elaborate theories about the relationship between cleanliness and health that guided both individual behavior and public policy. The foundation of Roman medical hygiene was the theory of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to this theory, health depended on maintaining the proper balance of these bodily fluids, and various hygiene practices were designed to promote this balance. Bathing, for example, was thought to help purge excess humours and restore equilibrium to the body. Roman physicians prescribed different bathing regimens for different conditions and constitutions. Hot baths were recommended for some ailments, cold baths for others, and various combinations of temperatures for complex conditions. The timing, duration, and frequency of baths were all carefully regulated according to medical theory, making hygiene a form of preventive medicine. Bloodletting was a common medical practice that Romans connected to hygiene and cleanliness. Physicians believed that removing excess blood could help restore humoral balance and prevent disease. This practice was often combined with bathing and other cleansing rituals, creating comprehensive treatment regimens that addressed both internal and external cleanliness. Diet was closely connected to hygiene in Roman medical thinking. Certain foods were believed to produce clean humours, while others generated dirty or corrupted bodily fluids. Physicians prescribed specific diets to promote internal cleanliness, often combined with external cleansing practices like bathing and exercise. The Roman understanding of disease transmission was limited, but included some remarkably accurate insights. They recognized that crowded, dirty conditions could spread illness, leading to public health measures like waste removal and water quality. Monitoring, however, they attributed disease to bad air miasma rather than microscopic organisms, leading to some ineffective prevention strategies. Personal hygiene recommendations from Roman physicians often included detailed instructions for daily cleansing routines. These might specify particular times for bathing, types of cleansing agents to use, and combinations of activities like exercise, massage, and rest. The wealthy often employed personal physicians who designed custom hygiene regimens based on individual needs and conditions. Roman military medicine placed particular emphasis on hygiene and sanitation. Army physicians understood that clean camps, pure water supplies, and proper waste disposal were essential for maintaining troop health. Military manuals included detailed instructions for camp hygiene, and commanders who neglected sanitation often faced serious outbreaks of disease among their soldiers. Women's health and hygiene received special attention from Roman physicians, who developed elaborate theories about female physiology and cleanliness needs. These theories were often based on misconceptions about women's bodies, but they did lead to some beneficial practices like regular bathing and attention to reproductive health. The treatment of wounds and injuries always included careful attention to cleanliness. Roman physicians understood that dirty wounds were more likely to become infected, leading to practices like wound washing, the use of clean bandages, and the sterilization of surgical instruments. While they didn't understand the germ theory of disease, their empirical observations led to many effective hygiene practices. Mental health was also connected to hygiene in Roman medical thinking. Physicians believed that physical cleanliness could promote mental clarity and emotional balance, while neglecting hygiene could lead to depression, anxiety, and other psychological problems. This led to the prescription of bathing and grooming as treatments for various mental conditions. Roman physicians also recognized the social and psychological benefits of good hygiene. They understood that clean, well-groomed individuals were more likely to be successful in business and social interactions, making hygiene a form of preventive medicine for social and economic health as well as physical well-being. The training of Roman physicians included extensive instruction in hygiene-related practices. Medical students learned to diagnose conditions based partly on patients' cleanliness and grooming, and they were taught to prescribe specific hygiene regimens as part of their treatment plans. This made hygiene an integral part of Roman medical practice rather than simply a social custom. However, Roman medical hygiene also included many dangerous practices based on incorrect theories. The use of toxic substances like lead and mercury in cosmetics and treatments, the practice of bloodletting, and the application of various harmful cleansing agents all caused significant health problems while being promoted as beneficial hygiene practices. The Roman economy of cleanliness was vast and complex, supporting entire industries and employing hundreds of thousands of people throughout the empire. From the slaves who heated bath water to the merchants who imported exotic perfumes, hygiene-related activities formed a significant portion of Roman economic life. The bath industry alone employed enormous numbers of people in various capacities. Skilled architects designed the great thermae, engineers maintained the hypocaust systems, and countless slaves provided fuel, water, and services to keep the baths operating. The construction and maintenance of major bath complexes required significant investment and ongoing expenditure. Professional hygiene services created numerous specialized occupations. Barbers not only cut hair but also provided dental care, minor surgery, and grooming services. Cosmeter specialized in applying makeup and perfumes, while ornatresses focused on elaborate hairstyling. These specialists often commanded high wages and could achieve considerable social status through their skills. The perfume and cosmetics industries required extensive trade networks to supply their raw materials. Merchants traveled throughout the known world to obtain rare ingredients, creating commercial relationships that stretched from Britain to India. The demand for luxury hygiene products drove exploration, trade, and cultural exchange across vast distances. Slave labor was fundamental to Roman hygiene practices, particularly among the wealthy. Personal attendants, bath slaves, hairdressers, and other hygiene-related servants represented significant investments for their owners. The most skilled hygiene slaves could be extremely valuable, sometimes worth more than skilled artisans or laborers. The cleaning and maintenance of clothing supported another major industry. Professional fullers operated shops throughout Roman cities, employing various workers and slaves to clean, process, and maintain garments. The supplies needed for this industry, fuller's earth, various chemicals, and specialized tools created additional economic activity and trade relationships. Water supply and waste management required massive public investment and ongoing maintenance costs. The construction of aqueducts, sewers, and public fountains represented some of the largest infrastructure projects in the ancient world. The economic impact of these systems extended far beyond their construction, as they enabled the concentration of population and economic activity that made Roman cities possible. The regulation of hygiene-related industries was extensive and varied by location and time period. Guilds controlled many trades related to cleanliness, setting standards, regulating prices, and ensuring quality. Government authorities also imposed taxes, fees, and regulations on hygiene-related businesses, generating revenue while attempting to maintain public health and order. Luxury hygiene products became important status symbols and investment opportunities. Wealthy Romans might spend enormous sums on rare perfumes, exotic cosmetics, and elaborate bathing accessories. These luxury goods often retained their value and could be traded or sold, making them a form of portable wealth. The social and economic mobility possible through hygiene-related careers was limited but real. Skilled practitioners could sometimes earn enough to purchase their freedom if they were slaves, or to improve their social standing if they were free. However, most hygiene-related work was considered somewhat degrading, limiting the social advancement possible through these careers. The economic impact of Roman hygiene practices extended beyond the immediate costs and benefits. The emphasis on cleanliness and appearance created cultural expectations that drove ongoing consumption and economic activity. Romans felt compelled to maintain certain standards of hygiene and grooming, creating steady demand for related products and services. International trade in hygiene-related goods was substantial and had significant political implications. The Roman appetite for exotic perfumes, cosmetics, and bathing accessories created trade. Relationships with distant peoples and sometimes influenced foreign policy decisions. Control of trade routes for luxury, hygiene products could be economically and strategically important. The decline of Roman hygiene practices had serious economic consequences as the empire weakened, the collapse of trade networks, the abandonment of infrastructure, and the loss of specialized knowledge all contributed to economic decline. Cities that could no longer maintain their baths, sewers, and water systems became less livable and economically productive. As we've explored the intricate world of Roman hygiene, it becomes clear that cleanliness in ancient Rome was far more than a simple matter of washing and grooming. It was a complex cultural system that encompassed social status, religious belief, medical theory, economic activity, and political power. The Roman approach to hygiene reveals fundamental aspects of their civilization and helps us understand both their achievements and their limitations. The Roman obsession with cleanliness stemmed from their belief that proper hygiene was essential for civilized life. To be clean was to be Roman, to be cultured, to be fully human in a way that barbarians could never achieve. This connection between cleanliness and civilization drove the enormous investment in bathing facilities, sewage systems, and hygiene-related industries that characterized Roman urban life. Yet Roman hygiene practices also revealed the deep inequalities and contradictions of their society. While wealthy Romans enjoyed elaborate baths, professional grooming services, and exotic cosmetics, slaves and the poor often struggled to maintain basic cleanliness. The very systems that provided luxury hygiene for the elite depended on the labor and often the degradation of those at the bottom of society. The sophistication of Roman hygiene technology and practices was remarkable for its time and wouldn't be matched again in Europe for over a millennium. The engineering knowledge required to build and maintain the great bath complexes, the chemical understanding necessary to create effective soaps and cosmetics, and the organizational skills needed to manage complex urban sanitation systems all demonstrate the high level of Roman civilization. However, Roman hygiene practices also included many dangerous and misguided elements. The use of toxic substances in cosmetics, the reliance on harmful medical theories, and the environmental damage caused by some industrial processes show that Roman knowledge, while advanced for its time, was still limited and sometimes dangerous. The social aspects of Roman hygiene reveal much about their values and priorities. The communal nature of bathing, the public character of many hygiene activities, and the social signaling involved in grooming and appearance all reflect a culture that valued community, hierarchy, and display. Roman hygiene was never just about individual cleanliness. It was about participating in and demonstrating one's place in Roman society. The economic impact of Roman hygiene practices was enormous and far-reaching. The industries built around cleanliness employed vast numbers of people, drove international trade, and influenced urban development throughout the empire. The Roman economy was, in many ways, built around the pursuit of cleanliness and the social status it conveyed. The decline and fall of Roman hygiene practices marked one of the most significant reversals in human development. As the infrastructure crumbled, the knowledge was lost, and the economic systems collapsed. European hygiene practices regressed to levels not seen since before Roman times. The loss of Roman sanitation, engineering in particular, had devastating consequences for urban life and public health. The legacy of Roman hygiene practices extends far beyond the ancient world. Many of our modern concepts about cleanliness, the social importance of appearance, and the connection between hygiene and health trace their origins to Roman innovations and attitudes. The very idea that civilized society requires sophisticated hygiene infrastructure is fundamentally Roman in origin. The Roman experience also offers important lessons about the relationship between hygiene and society. It shows how cultural values, economic systems, and technological capabilities all interact to shape hygiene practices. It demonstrates both the benefits and the costs of making cleanliness a central social value, and it reveals how hygiene practices can both unite and divide communities. Perhaps most importantly, the story of Roman hygiene reminds us that our current standards and practices are neither natural nor inevitable. They are the products of specific historical circumstances, cultural values, and technological capabilities. Understanding how Romans approached cleanliness helps us think more critically about our own hygiene practices and their social, economic, and environmental implications. The Romans built their civilization partly on the foundation of cleanliness, creating elaborate systems to keep their bodies, their clothing, their cities, and their consciences clean. In doing so, they achieved remarkable things, but also revealed the limitations and contradictions inherent in any human society. Their story reminds us that progress is never simple or straightforward, and that even our most basic daily practices are embedded in complex webs of culture, power, and meaning. So as dawn approaches and these tales of ancient cleanliness begin to fade like steam rising from a Roman bath, remember that the simple act of washing your face connects you to thousands of years of human culture and civilization. The Romans may have approached hygiene differently than we do, with different tools, different theories, and different social meanings, but their fundamental desire to be clean, to be healthy, and to be accepted by their community echoes in every soap bubble and every drop of bath water today. Their marble baths may be ruins, their perfume recipes lost, their social hierarchies dissolved, but their legacy lives on in every modern bathroom, every public health system, and every moment when we choose cleanliness over chaos, community over isolation, civilization over barbarism. The Romans taught us that to be human is to be clean, and in that lesson, at least, their empire never truly fell. Sleep well, knowing that you are heir to thousands of years of human ingenuity and effort devoted to the simple but profound goal of staying clean. The Romans would recognize the impulse, even if they might be puzzled by our methods. In the end, perhaps that's the most human thing of all, the eternal quest to wash away the dust of the day and face tomorrow fresh and clean. But our journey through Roman cleanliness is only part of a larger story about human civilization and our eternal struggle to create order from chaos, beauty from brutality, and meaning from the mundane tasks of daily life. As we've seen with Roman hygiene, seemingly simple activities like bathing or grooming can reveal the deepest truths about a society's values, fears, and aspirations. This brings us to another fascinating chapter in human development, the rise of Alexandria, the great lighthouse city of the ancient world, where knowledge and commerce flowed together like the convergence of great rivers. Just as Roman baths brought together people from all social classes in pursuit of cleanliness, Alexandria brought together scholars, merchants, and dreamers from across the known world in pursuit of something equally fundamental to human nature. Understanding Alexandria stood at the crossroads of three continents, where Africa, Asia, and Europe met in a swirl of trade winds, cultural exchange, and intellectual ferment. Founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE and developed by his successor Ptolemy I, the city was designed from its inception to be more than just another port town or administrative center. It was conceived as a beacon of learning and culture that would outshine even Athens in its intellectual glory. The most famous symbol of this ambition was the Pharos of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, rising over 100 meters into the Mediterranean sky. This massive lighthouse guided ships safely into the harbor while serving as a powerful symbol of human ingenuity and the city's role as a beacon of civilization. But the true wonder of Alexandria wasn't built of stone and mortar. It was built of papyrus and parchment, housed in the greatest library the world had ever known. The Great Library of Alexandria was more than just a repository of books. It was the world's first true research university, a place where scholars came not just to read the works of the past, but to create the knowledge of the future. The library's collection was said to contain over 400,000 scrolls at its peak, representing virtually all human knowledge available at the time. Every ship that entered Alexandria's harbor was searched, and any books found aboard were confiscated, copied, and added to the collection. The originals were kept while copies were returned to their owners. The scale of this intellectual enterprise was staggering. The library employed hundreds of scholars, scribes, and support staff, creating what was essentially the world's first think tank. These scholars weren't just preserving existing knowledge, they were actively pushing the boundaries of human understanding in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, geography, and countless other fields. It was in Alexandria that Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth with remarkable accuracy, using nothing more than shadows and geometric reasoning. Euclid developed his systematic approach to geometry that would remain the standard. For over 2,000 years, Aristarchus proposed that the earth revolved around the sun, an idea that wouldn't be accepted until nearly 2 millennia later. Hero invented the first steam engine, though it was regarded as merely an amusing toy, rather than the foundation of an industrial revolution. The library's approach to knowledge was revolutionary for its time. Rather than simply accepting the wisdom of the ancients, Alexandrian scholars subjected all claims to rigorous testing and verification. They translated works from dozens of languages, compared different versions of texts, and constantly sought to expand and refine human understanding. This systematic approach to learning created a culture of intellectual curiosity and critical thinking that influenced scholarship for centuries. The diversity of Alexandria's scholarly community was as remarkable as its intellectual achievements. The city attracted thinkers from throughout the Mediterranean world and beyond, Greeks and Egyptians, Jews and Phoenicians, Romans and Persians, all working together in pursuit of knowledge. This cosmopolitan atmosphere fostered a cross of ideas that would have been impossible in more homogeneous societies. The library's influence extended far beyond its walls through an extensive network of smaller libraries and schools throughout the Mediterranean world. Scholars trained in Alexandria carried their methods and discoveries to other cities, spreading the Alexandrian approach to learning across the ancient world. The city became the intellectual capital of the Mediterranean, a place where ambitious young minds came to learn from the greatest teachers of their time. But Alexandria's golden age couldn't last forever. The city's decline began with political instability as the Ptolemaic dynasty weakened and eventually fell to Roman rule. While the Romans initially respected Alexandria's intellectual traditions, changing priorities and budgets gradually reduced support for scholarly activities. The rise of Christianity brought new challenges, as some religious leaders viewed the library's pagan texts and secular learning with suspicion. The final blow came not from deliberate destruction, but from gradual neglect and changing circumstances. As the Roman Empire declined and trade routes shifted, Alexandria lost its position as the Mediterranean's intellectual center. The library's funding dried up, its buildings fell into disrepair, and its collections were gradually dispersed or lost. By the time Arab armies conquered Alexandria in 641 CE, the great library was already a shadow of its former self. The loss of Alexandria's library represents one of history's greatest intellectual tragedies. Countless works of ancient literature, science, and philosophy vanished forever, taking with them knowledge that might have accelerated human progress by centuries. We can only imagine what insights were lost, what discoveries were forgotten, what questions might have been answered if Alexandria's intellectual tradition had continued unbroken. Yet the legacy of Alexandria lives on in the scientific method, in the ideal of universal education, and in the belief that knowledge belongs to all humanity rather than to any single culture or nation. Every modern university, every public library, every research institution traces its lineage back to the scholars who gathered in Alexandria's halls to push the boundaries of human understanding. The story of Alexandria reminds us that civilization is fragile, that knowledge must be actively preserved and transmitted from generation to generation, and that the quest for understanding requires not just brilliant individuals, but supportive institutions and communities. It shows us both the heights that human intellect can reach and the tragedy that results when societies fail to value and maintain their intellectual heritage. As we consider Alexandria's rise and fall, we're reminded of another great center of learning and culture that faced similar challenges, but responded in dramatically different ways. The monasteries of medieval Europe, which preserved and transmitted classical knowledge through the dark centuries that followed Rome's collapse, while Roman baths crumbled and aqueducts fell into disrepair. A different kind of institution emerged to carry forward the torch of civilization. In monasteries scattered across Europe, monks labored not just to save souls, but to save knowledge itself, copying manuscripts, preserving classical texts, and maintaining the intellectual traditions that might otherwise have been lost forever. The monastic movement began in the deserts of Egypt and Syria, where hermits sought spiritual perfection through isolation and asceticism. But as Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, these individual hermits gradually came together. In organized communities governed by detailed rules that regulated every aspect of daily life, including the crucial work of preserving and copying texts. Saint Benedict of Nursia, writing in the 6th century, established the Rule of Saint Benedict, which became the foundation for Western monasticism. This rule emphasized the importance of manual labor, including the copying of manuscripts as a form of prayer and spiritual discipline. For medieval monks, the patient work of transcription was as much a religious duty as attending Mass or caring for the poor. The scriptoriums of medieval monasteries were remarkable institutions, combining spiritual devotion with scholarly precision. Monks would spend hours each day hunched over desks, carefully copying texts, letter by letter, onto parchment made from animal skins. The work required enormous patience, skill, and attention to detail, as a single mistake could ruin weeks of labor. The process of creating a manuscript was complex and time-consuming. First, the parchment had to be prepared by cleaning, stretching, and smoothing animal skins until they were suitable for writing. Then, scribes would carefully mark out the pages, creating guidelines to ensure straight lines and consistent spacing. The actual copying required specialized tools, quill pens cut from goose feathers, inks made from various natural substances, and rulers and erasers for corrections. Illuminated manuscripts added another layer of complexity and beauty to this process. Skilled artists would create elaborate decorations, initial letters, and miniature paintings that transformed simple texts into works of art. These illuminations weren't just decorative, they served as visual aids to help readers understand and remember the content, making the manuscripts more effective tools for education and spiritual instruction. The range of texts preserved by monastic script was remarkable. While religious works naturally dominated their output, monks also copied classical Latin and Greek texts, scientific treatises, historical chronicles, and works of literature. Many of the classical texts we have today survive only because medieval monks recognized their value and took the trouble to copy them. The monastery of Monte Cassino in Italy, founded by Saint Benedict himself, became one of the most important centers of manuscript production in medieval Europe. Its library contained thousands of volumes, and its scribes produced copies that were distributed to monasteries throughout the continent. Other major centers included the monasteries of Cluny in France, Reichenau in Germany, and Jarrow in England, where the Venerable Bede wrote his influential historical works. The preservation of knowledge wasn't limited to copying existing texts. Many monks were scholars in their own right, creating new works of theology, philosophy, history, and science. These original compositions were then copied and distributed through the same networks that preserved classical texts, ensuring that medieval learning continued to develop and evolve. The educational function of monasteries extended beyond the preservation of texts to active teaching and learning. Monastic schools trained not only future monks, but also secular clergy and educated laypeople. These schools developed curricula based on the 7 liberal arts: grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music, providing a foundation for higher learning that would eventually flower in the medieval universities. The influence of monastic learning reached its peak during the Carolingian Renaissance of the 8th and 9th centuries, when Charlemagne and his successors actively promoted education and scholarship. The emperor invited the English scholar Alcuin to establish a palace, school, and encouraged the founding of monastery schools throughout his empire. This period saw a remarkable revival of learning and literacy that helped lay the groundwork for the intellectual developments of the High Middle Ages. The monastic preservation of knowledge faced constant challenges. Viking raids destroyed many monasteries and their libraries, while political instability and warfare disrupted the peaceful conditions necessary for scholarly work. The Black Death, of the 14th century killed many monks and disrupted monastic communities, while the Protestant Reformation and the dissolution of monasteries in many countries further threatened this traditional system of knowledge preservation. Yet, despite these challenges, the monastic tradition of learning persisted and evolved. The manuscripts produced in medieval scriptoriums formed the foundation for the first printed books, ensuring that classical and medieval knowledge would be available to much wider audiences. The scholarly methods developed in monasteries influenced the development of medieval universities and the emergence of modern academic disciplines. The legacy of monastic learning extends far beyond the preservation of ancient texts. The monks who labored in medieval scriptoriums established principles of scholarship, education, and cultural preservation that continue to influence our approach to knowledge and learning. Their dedication to preserving the intellectual heritage of the past while creating new knowledge for the future provides a model for how societies can maintain continuity while adapting to changing circumstances. The transition from the manuscript culture of medieval monasteries to the print culture of the Renaissance represents one of the most significant technological and cultural shifts in human history. The invention of movable type printing by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440 didn't just change how books were produced, it transformed how knowledge was created, distributed, and consumed throughout European society. Before Gutenberg's innovation, books were luxury items available only to the wealthy and institutional libraries. A single manuscript might take months to produce and cost as much as a farm. This scarcity meant that knowledge was concentrated in the hands of a small elite, clergy, nobles, and the occasional wealthy merchant who could afford to maintain a personal library. The printing press changed everything. Suddenly, books could be produced quickly and cheaply, making them accessible to a much broader segment of society. The first printed Bible, produced by Gutenberg himself, marked the beginning of a revolution that would democratize knowledge and transform European culture. The technical aspects of early printing were remarkably sophisticated. Gutenberg's system used individual metal letters that could be arranged and rearranged to form words and sentences, then inked and pressed onto paper to create multiple identical copies. This process required innovations in metallurgy, ink chemistry, paper production, and mechanical engineering that represented centuries of accumulated technical knowledge. The social impact of printing was even more revolutionary than its technical achievements. As books became cheaper and more widely available, literacy rates began to rise throughout Europe. People who had never owned a book suddenly had access to libraries worth of information. Ideas could spread more quickly and widely than ever before, creating new possibilities for education, debate, and social change. The Protestant Reformation provides perhaps the clearest example of printing's transformative power. Martin Luther's critiques of Catholic Church practices might have remained local concerns if not for the printing press, which allowed his writings to be rapidly reproduced and distributed throughout Europe. Within decades, religious reform movements had spread across the continent, fundamentally altering the political and cultural landscape of Europe. Scientific revolution also depended heavily on print culture. Before printing, scientific knowledge was transmitted through personal correspondence, hand-copied manuscripts, and oral tradition, all methods that were slow, unreliable, and prone to error. Printed books allowed scientists to build systematically on each other's work, creating the cumulative progress that characterizes modern science. The standardization that printing enabled was crucial for scientific progress. When multiple copies of a book were identical, scholars could refer to specific pages and passages with confidence that their colleagues would be looking at the same text. This standardization made possible the precise citation and verification that are essential to scientific method. Printing also facilitated the development of new forms of literature and scholarship. Newspapers and pamphlets made possible rapid communication about current events, while systematic encyclopedias and reference works organized human knowledge in unprecedented ways. The novel emerged as a literary form partly because printing made it economically feasible to produce long fictional works for popular audiences. The economic implications of printing were enormous. The book trade became a major industry, employing thousands of people as printers, binders, booksellers, and distributors. Venice, Paris, and other cities became major centers of book production, attracting scholars, writers, and entrepreneurs from across Europe. The profits from successful books funded further innovation and expansion of the printing industry. However, the spread of print culture also created new anxieties and challenges. Religious and political authorities worried about their ability to control the flow of information, leading to censorship, book burning, and the development of prohibited book lists. The Catholic Church's Index of Forbidden Books, first published in 1559, represented an attempt to maintain doctrinal control. In an age of information proliferation, the quality and accuracy of printed books were also concerns. While printing eliminated the copying errors that plagued manuscript culture, it introduced new possibilities for error in typesetting and proofreading, pirated editions, and unauthorized translations sometimes distorted original texts, leading to confusion and controversy about authentic versions. Despite these challenges, print culture continued to expand and evolve throughout the early modern period. Technological improvements made printing faster and cheaper, while growing literacy rates created ever larger markets for books. By the 18th century, books had become common household items in many parts of Europe, fundamentally altering how people thought about knowledge, learning, and their place in the world. The printing revolution also laid the groundwork for later technological developments in communication and information storage. The principles of mass production, standardization, and wide distribution that characterized early printing would later be applied to newspapers, magazines, and eventually electronic media. The cultural changes initiated by printing increased literacy, democratization of knowledge, and acceleration of intellectual exchange continue to shape our world today. As we trace the evolution from Roman baths to monastic scriptoriums to printing presses, we see a consistent human drive to create, preserve, and share knowledge and culture. Each technological and social innovation built upon previous achievements while adapting to new challenges and opportunities. This process of cultural transmission and transformation continues today in our digital age, where information spreads even more rapidly and widely than Gutenberg could have imagined. The renaissance that emerged from this ferment of technological innovation and cultural change represents one of history's most dramatic examples of how new methods of creating and sharing knowledge can transform entire civilizations. Beginning in the Italian city-states of the 14th century and spreading throughout Europe over the next 2 centuries, the Renaissance marked a fundamental shift in how Europeans understood themselves and their world. The word Renaissance means rebirth, and in many ways the period represented a conscious attempt to revive and build upon the achievements of classical antiquity. Renaissance scholars, known as humanists, actively sought out ancient Greek and Roman texts, studying them not just for their religious or moral content, but for what they could teach about art, science, politics, and human nature. This revival of classical learning was made possible by several converging factors. The fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks in 1453 drove many Byzantine scholars westward, bringing with them Greek manuscripts and knowledge that had been preserved in the Eastern Roman Empire. The invention of printing made these texts widely available for the first time, and the wealth generated by Mediterranean trade provided the resources necessary to support scholarly activities. The Renaissance approach to knowledge differed fundamentally from medieval scholasticism. While medieval scholars had focused on reconciling classical learning with Christian doctrine, Renaissance humanists were more interested in understanding ancient texts on their own terms. This shift led to more critical and historical approaches to scholarship, as well as greater emphasis on individual creativity and achievement. The impact of Renaissance humanism extended far beyond academic circles. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael drew inspiration from classical models while developing new techniques and styles that emphasized realism, proportion, and human dignity. Their works celebrated human achievement and potential in ways that marked a sharp departure from the more otherworldly focus of medieval art. Scientific investigation also flourished during the Renaissance, as scholars applied systematic observation and experimentation to understand the natural world. Nicolaus Copernicus revolutionized astronomy by proposing that the Earth orbited the Sun, while Andreas Vesalius transformed medicine through detailed anatomical studies based on human dissection. These advances laid the groundwork for the scientific revolution that would follow. The political implications of Renaissance thinking were equally significant. Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince analyzed political power with a realism and pragmatism that shocked contemporary readers, but influenced political thought for centuries. Renaissance concepts of individual dignity and achievement also contributed to new ideas about government, citizenship, and human rights that would eventually challenge traditional monarchical authority. The economic foundation of Renaissance culture was the wealth generated by expanding trade networks and new financial instruments. Italian banking families, like the Medici, accumulated fortunes that allowed them to patronize artists, scholars, and architects on an unprecedented scale. This patronage system created the economic conditions necessary for the cultural flowering that characterized the Renaissance. The Renaissance also marked a crucial period in the development of modern European identity. Renaissance scholars and artists created new forms of national literature, art, and scholarship that celebrated local languages and cultures while drawing upon universal human themes. This combination of cosmopolitan learning and local pride would become a defining characteristic of European civilization. However, the Renaissance was not uniformly progressive or beneficial. The same period that produced great works of art and scholarship also witnessed increased social inequality, religious conflict, and the beginning of European colonial expansion that would have devastating consequences for indigenous peoples. Around the world, the Renaissance celebration of individual achievement sometimes came at the expense of collective welfare and social justice. The spread of Renaissance ideas throughout Europe was facilitated by the same print culture that had emerged from Gutenberg's innovations. Renaissance texts were rapidly translated and distributed, carrying new ideas about art, science, politics, and human nature to courts and universities across the continent. This intellectual exchange created a pan-European cultural movement that transcended political boundaries. The Protestant Reformation, which began just as the Renaissance was reaching its peak, represented both a continuation and a challenge to Renaissance principles. Protestant reformers like Martin Luther drew upon Renaissance humanist methods to study biblical texts, but they rejected the Renaissance celebration of classical pagan culture in favor of a return to early Christian principles. The Renaissance eventually gave way to new intellectual and cultural movements, but its influence on European and world civilization was profound and lasting. The Renaissance emphasis on individual achievement, critical thinking, empirical observation, and cultural creativity established patterns that continue to shape modern education. Science and artistic expression, the legacy of the Renaissance can be seen in everything from our educational systems, which still emphasize the liberal arts curriculum developed by Renaissance humanists, to our legal and political institutions, which incorporate Renaissance ideas about individual rights and governmental accountability. The Renaissance ideal of the well-rounded individual who combines intellectual, artistic, and practical abilities continues to influence how we think about human potential and achievement. As we reach the end of our journey through the interconnected worlds of Roman hygiene, Alexandrian scholarship, monastic preservation, printing innovation, and Renaissance rebirth, we can see how each of these developments built upon and transformed the achievements of previous generations. The Romans who perfected the art of public bathing could never have imagined that their engineering innovations would inspire the aqueducts that supplied medieval monasteries, or that the manuscripts preserved by monks would fuel a Renaissance that would transform European civilization. This pattern of cultural transmission and transformation continues today in our digital age, where information travels instantaneously across global networks and new technologies constantly reshape how we create, preserve, and share human knowledge. The challenges we face maintaining the quality and reliability of information, ensuring equitable access to knowledge, balancing innovation with preservation, echo the concerns of Romans, worried about bathhouse hygiene, monks struggling to preserve classical texts, and Renaissance scholars adapting ancient wisdom to modern needs. The story of human hygiene that began our exploration reveals itself to be part of a much larger narrative about civilization itself, how humans create systems to maintain order, beauty, and meaning in their lives, how these systems evolve and adapt to changing circumstances, and how the knowledge and practices of the past continue to inform and inspire the innovations of the future. In the end, Perhaps the most remarkable thing about the Roman pursuit of cleanliness is not the sophisticated technology they developed or the elaborate social rituals they created, but their fundamental belief that human beings deserve to live in clean, beautiful, dignified surroundings. This belief, transmitted through countless generations and adapted to countless different circumstances, continues to drive human efforts to create better living conditions, more effective institutions, and more meaningful lives. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, clean and comfortable in ways that even the wealthiest Romans could hardly have imagined, remember that you are the heir to thousands of years of human ingenuity, dedication, and hope. The Romans who built their great baths, the monks who copied their precious manuscripts, the Renaissance artists who celebrated human potential, all of them contributed to the world you inhabit today. Their dreams of cleanliness, knowledge, and beauty live on in every shower you take, every book you read, every work of art that moves you, in preserving and building upon their achievements while adapting them to our own needs and circumstances. We honor their memory and continue their eternal human quest to create civilization from chaos, meaning from mundane routine, and hope from the simple daily acts that make life worth living. Rest well, knowing that tomorrow will bring new opportunities to participate in this ancient and ongoing human endeavor, to add your own small contribution to the great chain of civilization that stretches from the marble baths of ancient Rome to whatever wonders await in the future. The Romans would recognize the impulse, even if they might be puzzled by our methods. In the end, perhaps that's the most human thing of all, the eternal quest to wash away the dust of yesterday and face tomorrow, fresh, clean, and full of possibility.